You are now watching the Amazing Mets PreGame Show with your hosts, Rob and CP.
Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets PreGame Show right here on both of our channels and on X. Finally, the New York Mets are back home in Queens after 2 weeks of not being at home from the end of the season until today. And they're finally back home. The fans get to see them. The fans are going to be rowdy. The players are going to be ready to go. And game 3 is going to be freaking bonkers. So let's get to it. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why, but there's some nerves coming out. Right now, I don't know what it is. I'm not stepping on the field. I'm sure these players are feeling those natural nerves that we were talking about a couple days ago on our stream. But again, if you missed the content yesterday, Rob went live on his Mets Talk Live. I did the Mets Off Day Talk and a nightcap. Make sure you go check out those streams, especially after you're done watching this. Please hit the thumbs up on both streams. This is going to be a great day. Hopefully an even better day if the Mets get the victory on the post game that we're going to be doing right after the game. We got you all covered. I'm excited, Rob. I'm excited. It's been about, a month since Lindor's taken an at-bat at Citi Field.
Yeah.
It's been about 16 days since this Mets team has played a game at Citi Field. I'm really confident. And you know what? It starts with Sean Manaea. I think that I can confidently say that this game starts with Sean Manaea. Let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you're going to have that exciting nerves going into it, especially you haven't played at home for a while, for the players, for the coaches, for the fans, of course. So, yeah, it's that natural feeling, and it's awesome. It's so much fun, and this is what we want, right? We want playoff home games, right? This is what we play for. This is what we want. Right? Yeah, there's nerves. This is a swing game, right? Somebody's going to be leaving today, coming into tomorrow in elimination mode, right? It's either going to be us or the Phillies. So this is a big swing game here, and it just so happens that we're playing at Citi Field in Queens. And look, can you say the Mets have home field advantage? Sure. We would have said that about Philadelphia as well, but we found a way to split. And Philadelphia is trying to get a split of these two home games. There's no doubt about that, because one split with us, they're going back home for game 5. We're going back home. They're going back home for game 5, and we have to have Wheeler ready to go in game 5 and try to beat him. So there's a lot of factors for both teams of why this game is very, very important, because you want a desperate team in the Phillies tomorrow in elimination mode, and you're at home where you can clinch and get to the NLCS. But you're 100% right, Chris. It starts with the lefty on the mound, Sean Manaea. We need big-time ace Sean Manaea to stand up today. 100% we need that from him. We need zeros, right? We need a start where we're like, that's the start we needed right there. To be quite honest, we need that Jose Quintana start, to be really honest with you. Give me that, right? Because I think this offense is going to score runs, right? They've proven it in this series already, right? They scored 6 runs in game 1, 6 runs in game 2, right? 12 runs in this series, and they didn't even get to game 3 yet. So I'm waiting for one of these pitchers to step up. And when you have to look at it as a whole and say Jose Quintana has been your best pitcher in the postseason, that needs to change, right? I still want Jose Quintana to pitch well, but we need ace Sean Manaea today, Chris. 100%. You are dead on about that.
Yeah, it really does start with him, right? The offense has been getting the job done in the first 2 games of this series. We've been talking about that, right? You talk about 6 runs in the first game, and then you talk about 6 runs in the second game. So 12 runs over 2 games of 18 innings of baseball, right? Just around there, should get the job done, right? And we always talk about game 2, and we did the recaps of, how it should have, could have, would have been a 2-0 lead for the New York Mets. Listen, doesn't matter. All that's in the past. Sean Manaea has an opportunity, right, to do something special here. And I know that he had a pretty decent start in the 2024 playoffs. And I said this yesterday on my Mets Talk off day that I did with Nick from the He Did This to Me podcast. Make sure to go out. You guys are going to subscribe over there and checking out that stream. But I said that Sean Manaea, before that decent, and I'll call it decent, right, start against the Brewers in game 2, lost to no fault of Sean Manaea's whatsoever. He hasn't really been the best in the limited sample size that he's had in the postseason, right? You talk about an appearance against the Phillies back in 2022. A reporter asked him about it just a couple days ago ahead of the start, saying, what do you feel facing this team that kind of got to you as a San Diego Padre when he was with the Padres organization back in 2022? Again, some of that team is different. Some of that team is the same. So he's going to be seeing a similar lineup, but not completely the same as that 2022 Phillies team that ended up going to the World Series that year. But one thing that Sean Manaea said is that he's a completely different pitcher than he was back then, which is an absolute fact. And you've been following the Mets, and you've been following our coverage of the New York Mets and of Sean Manaea, you know that he is a completely different pitcher. Also, he was a reliever back then in San Diego, where he allowed those 5 earned runs in 1 inning pitched in that 2022 playoff series. So again, completely different stakes, completely different pitcher, little bit of a different lineup, but the strategy needs to remain the same. We talk about the one gripe that we had, or the multiple gripes of this one aspect of the game that we had that contributed heavily to a game 2 loss, was the pitch sequence and the approach to certain batters of the Phillies lineup, especially those middle guys really from the top, Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos. They need to figure out the pitch sequence. I don't want to rehash it, but I'm just going to say this simple thing. Do not throw 5 or even 4 sweepers or sliders in a row to these guys. They are major league professional hitters. They are a talented lineup at the end of the day. If you are going to go up there and expect to continue to throw the same pitch in hopes that they continue to chase it, you are going to be sadly mistaken, and you are going to pay in the end, which is what the Mets did. They paid for it in game 2. Come with a new approach. I have no doubt in my mind that Jeremy Hefner, that Francisco Alvarez, who's calling the pitches, and Sean Manaea witnessed everything that went wrong in game 2, right, in that 6th inning and beyond, and are going to make the proper adjustments. So it starts with Sean Manaea. Fully expect and hope that the bats are able to get to Aaron Nola at some point, but if not, definitely the bullpen. And again, I just want to be riding high into this post game. I think that you have to take it day by day. It's all hands on deck. You cannot be managing, obviously, and I don't think that Mendoza is going to do so for tomorrow's game. You got to win today, no matter what personnel you have to use. We'll talk a little bit about who we could see out of the bullpen, but I think the consensus is that, honestly, 5 innings of keeping the game close is great, but from your ace that Sean Manaea is for this New York Mets team and has been this entire season, we need 6 or 7 innings tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And plus, on top of that, right, when it comes to pitch sequencing and everything like that, yeah, absolutely. I just think they need to execute. Like, stop being afraid to throw your best pitch to guys that, you're a little bit, you're going to be wary of certain guys. Absolutely, right? If the situation calls for it and it's very obvious you're going to try to pitch around somebody, all right, I can try to understand that. But 1, you're home. 2, just execute. Use your best pitch. If you get beat by your best pitch, nobody's gonna bitch and moan about it, right? That was the whole thing about game 2, right? I don't care if you get beat by your best pitch. If McGill would have thrown his splitter or his fastball, or somebody would have thrown, each one of those 3 guys that we talked about that we don't have to rehash, if they would have thrown their best pitch and got beat, there wouldn't have been a conversation of why they threw that pitch. The batter got the best of them that day. That's it. You can't lose on your 3rd best pitch. And you can't even lose on your 2nd best pitch, to be quite honest with you, especially when there's an option to go to either your best pitch, your first best pitch, or your 2nd best pitch. They need to go after the guys, right? Unless the situation is very obvious of pitching around somebody or intentional walking somebody, you have to go after them and use your best pitch. Right? We all know what Manaea's best pitch is. We all know what the other guy's best pitch was in the other games. In game 2, that's what they have to do. And it comes down to execution, Chris. It really does, right? Here's what I know when it comes to the Mets, right? I know they still have that comeback ability. Unfortunately for us, and it benefited the Phillies, they had the last at bat, right? I truly believe this. If there was another inning for us to come up, they would have come back again. Why? Because they've proven that. Now, in these next 2 games, we have the last at bat. So regardless if we're down a run or 2, I feel like we're going to come back because they've proven it. And that is always going to be on the mind of the Philadelphia Phillies. They don't have the last at bat anymore because the way the Philly fans were acting and the way the Phillies players were reacting when they were up 6-4, they thought this game was over. They really did. And when Vientos hit that ball over the wall, they panned to that Phillies dugout. And the faces on them looked absolutely shocked. Now, credit to them, they bounced back and they won that ball game. But there's still that in their mind that this team could still come back, and there will be no chance for the Phillies to come and get another at bat because we got the last at bat. I think that's a big deal with a team that has been commonly coming back over these last week and a half, 2 weeks when we haven't been at home. We've been doing this on the road. Now that we had the final at bat, finally, I think that's a huge deal, and I think we have to talk. I think it has to be talked about a little bit more because that is something that can be key to these next 2 games that the Mets had the final at bat because they come back on the road so many times when they didn't have their last at bat.
And it plays also into the strategy of how Mendoza utilizes the bullpen
Correct.
in that manner as well, knowing that you have the last at bat. And if you need to post a 0 in the top of the 9th to give yourself a chance to walk that team off, then obviously, right, you're gonna play a little bit differently. But I think the bottom line is that, right, I don't expect it to change, but ideally you want to set yourself up. And I know it hasn't worked out this way when the Mets get off to early leads, but again, like, this is baseball. You would hope your pitchers execute through the entire game, and you want to get that early lead. These 2 teams have been close, right? Basically, the largest deficit was for the Phillies at 3-0 for the large majority of that second game before they came back. But innings 1 through 7, I mean, not really. There's no really separation between these 2 teams, right? Expect it to be close for the rest of the series, and the deciding factors, just as it has been for the first 3 games, is the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. Now, obviously, the Phillies executed just a little bit better than the New York Mets did in innings 7, 8, and 9 in NLDS Game 2. But again, like, we would want to go into those innings with the lead and not trying to come back. I think that a lot of people not a lot of people, but some people might be getting carried away because they've seen how these games have been going, going back to Milwaukee. And when the Mets are down, they come back and they end up winning versus where they had a lead in Game 2 and both Game 2s in the NLDS and the wild card, right? And they end up choking it away in the later innings. They're like, okay, why don't we just go down and then try to come back from behind again? No. That's not really how baseball works. So again, you got to do everything right. You got to play a complete game. This is a 27-out game. We say this all the time now because I think a lot of people forget that, and these teams forget, right? You got to keep tacking on runs. You got to keep tacking on runs. That is an inevitable and crucial part of this game. You cannot get stagnant and you cannot get lethargic with the bats. After 3-0, we saw, right, the Mets get a tad bit lethargic, right? Just a little bit. And I know that's kind of a large ask because obviously the offense wasn't really the ones to blame in that game whatsoever. And when the Phillies ended up tying it, they went out there and Brandon Nimmo smacked the go-ahead home run. And obviously they came back again with Mark Vientos' home run in the 9th inning. So it's hard to fault the Mets offense. But again, right, when you're playing against a team that you know it's going to be close for the first 7 innings, you want as much separation as absolutely possible. So, this is what we expected, Rob. Again, this is what we expected. We need to go out there, realize that it's going to be a close series. The Phillies are absolutely, right, no slouches. No one's telling you that. We all knew this is going to be a close series, right? And talking about this, about how it's going to be a tight series is not negative, and it's not negative and indicative about how this Mets team has been playing. We are as confident as ever. I am as confident as ever. When we talk about what can put the Mets above the Phillies in this series, that is the differences about what we're talking about between this Mets team and this Phillies team right now. So again, people get it misconstrued all the time. We're riding high into this series, right? We're riding high into the homestand in these next two games. We don't want this game to come back. We don't want there to be a game 5. You got to do everything and push all the little characteristics of the game of baseball into your favor in order to make a close series perhaps not so close. And everyone's, listen, how many people in the national media, not that it matters, right? Because us Mets fans, right, we stay together, we believe in this team, or the large majority of this fan base believes in this team, I would hope by this point. You know, who's talking about the Mets taking this series, right? Especially to begin the series. You got people still saying Phillies in 4. People genuinely think that the Phillies are going to go into Citi Field and win both games. And they very well could. I don't want to say that that option's off the table. They very well could, because again, you could play the most perfect game of baseball and the other team can still beat you somehow, some way if things don't break right for you one time, right? That's all it takes in the game of baseball. But again, you know, this team has earned the benefit of the doubt, as was the case when you take game 1 in game 2 with your best pitcher. You got, like, that's the game you have to take. I don't want to be coming back up here on the pregame tomorrow talking about an elimination game for the New York Mets with Jose Quintana on the mound. As great as he's been, Rob, as great as he's been, nobody wants to be talking about that. This is the game to get, because then you can confidently say that once more the pressure is all on the Philadelphia Phillies. We talk about this pressure thing all the time too. And I know that's like a little overstated at this point, because I always tell you that both teams are dealing with pressure. But if you get this Phillies team, right, on their heels, it took a pretty large effort for them in game 2. It was looking pretty bleak for them. Let's just say that. It was looking pretty bleak for them for the large majority of the game. It seemed like they got that confidence after they tied it up 3-3. But again, how do you go away? How do you mitigate that in terms of not giving that confidence? It's not, let's get the batters and go after the batters that you should be going after, right? In terms of Luis Severino and what we saw in terms of Edwin Diaz. Stop abandoning your 98 to 99 mile per hour fastball. I think that is probably my biggest rallying cry for the next 2 games for these Mets pitchers.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Shomania with that sinker that he throws up in his zone, he can't abandon that. Listen, this is a strikeout team. Again, they are a power hitting team. They want to hit the ball out of the ballpark. That's how they win. That's how they come back into ball games. And that's what we saw in game 2. And on top of that, which is very interesting, you brought up the pressure that is on the Phillies. And I agree with you. Right? Yesterday on my show, there was people that saying that the pressure's on the Mets. How? There is no pressure on the Mets. You saw it after the post game after game 2. They know the pressure's not on them. The Phillies are supposed to beat us, right? They're the division champs. They are quote unquote World Series contenders, right? They're the team that are slowly trickling backwards over the last 2 seasons. World Series 2022, NLCS loss 2023. What's next? Right? They have to at least get to the NLCS. That should be their status quo point, their line of demarcation. They're supposed to be back there. So anything less than that is a disaster for them. And that's why the pressure is on them. Now, I do think that there probably will be a little bit of anxiety. There will be probably trying too hard for the Mets, the same way the Phillies were in game 1 after the Schwarber home run, right? They were trying to do too much in game 1. They were definitely trying to do too much in game 1 in front of their fan base, right? And I think they did it throughout the game, and that's why they basically lost that game. I think they completely went away from their game, even though their game is home runs. If they hit home runs, you're going to have a hard time beating them. They're a home run, strikeout hitting team. That's exactly what they are. They haven't changed that 2 years ago. They haven't changed that this year. That's exactly what they are. Now, the Mets have to avoid, and Sean Manaea and the offense have to avoid doing too much, right? Sean Manaea can't be overthrowing. He's not throwing 97, 98. He's not even throwing 96. He's going to throw between 92 and 94. Occasionally, he'll throw a 95 miles an hour fastball. He can't overthrow. You overthrow, you get yourself into trouble by walking people. The same thing with the lineup. They can't all go up there and start trying to hit home runs. Now, this lineup is very unique where they can beat you with singles and they can also beat you with the long ball, as we've seen in game 2. Even though they didn't win the ball game, they did a lot of their damage with the home run ball. And in game 1, it was all singles. So this team can beat you in many different ways. The Phillies don't. They can't. They have to find their way back into a ball game by hitting a home run. And look, that's the quickest way to do it. And it's been successful for them. But I'm reminding the Phillies fans in general that you also have won nothing. Right? You've been backtailing the last 2 seasons. And you were the Mets in 2022, which you like to forget and act like the Mets don't belong when you were that team 2 years ago. And that's the always frustrating thing, because the Phillies were not better than any of the teams they faced in every round of the playoffs in 2022. Similar to the Mets, where everybody had the Brewers beating the Mets, the Phillies beating the Mets, and who knows what the future. The fact of the matter is, the game is not played on paper. You can be the best team on paper, but that means shit. You still got to prove it on the field. And as of right now, the Mets and the Phillies need to prove it, right? I'm confident in the Mets because I've seen what they have done over these last 2 weeks. They've done things that I never seen in my lifetime as a fan. And there's a lot of people around baseball that never seen what the Mets have been doing on the road, by the way, and not being at home. That's a huge difference that needs to be talked about enough. And I'm glad we're talking about it because it is a talking point. And that's where people aren't talking about it. Look, I'm not going to X the national broadcast who are basically wearing Phillies hats, when they're not showing on TV the way they're acting. But we see it as fans. We know what this team can do. If they play fundamental baseball and they don't make mistakes, they're going to end up having a great chance of winning the ballgame. I think that's the way the Mets have played, and that's how they have to win. Because you make mistakes, the Phillies will capitalize because they're a very good team.
Yeah, and the Mets aren't really the only ones dealing with these broadcasts. I saw the call from TBS on the Giancarlo Stanton double play yesterday. The Royals fans, I know if anyone's watching this or will watch this that's a Royals fan, I completely agree and understand where you're coming from and being in your shoes of these broadcasters basically wearing, like you said, Rob, the opposing team's jersey while they're on the broadcast just by the tone of their voice, which is absolutely ridiculous. I think baseball and baseball fans deserve better and they deserve more neutral announcers, but that's neither here nor there because that doesn't really impact what happens on the field. Listen, Sean Manaea, as Marcus is saying in the chat, location is everything. It's the same thing for Jose Quintana. He needs to be perfect with his location because he throws 91, 92 miles per hour. Maybe if he's lucky, he hits 93. Same thing with Manaea, really, right? He doesn't have an overpowering fastball. He'll hit 93, 94 consistently, and maybe he'll touch 95. But it's really about the awkwardness of his tweaked mechanics and how he kind of falls off the mound and gives hitters a little bit of a different arm angle a la Chris Sale, right? That's who he emulated to put that into consideration for his sort of delivery. But, I'm curious to see how he goes out there and approaches the Phillies lineup because as I said on my stream yesterday, right, we all know that Manaea's sweeper is fantastic. And that's probably been his bread and butter in terms of the put away pitch. But last time out against the Phillies, right, in that series, I believe that was the last Mets home series that they played. It was the Saturday game. Manaea threw 60 sinkers. That's 62 seam fastballs of his 89 pitches, something of that nature. That is a lot. That's a large majority of pitches. Now, I'm curious to see where he locates those two seamers. We've been seeing that different guys are giving different looks. I think the large majority of the time, I know Carlos Ramos is not going to like this in the chat, but the large majority of the time, these Mets pitchers love to live up in the zone against these opposing teams. We've seen it, right, in the Brewer series. We saw it in that Braves doubleheader. And we've seen it at times against the Phillies as well. Sean Manaea has had 3 starts against the Phillies this year. He's had 2 good starts, 2 premier quality starts, and 1 start that hasn't gone his way against the Phillies this year. Again, the same type of team, the same Mets team that we saw many months back is not the same team. Just the same thing. The same thing goes for the Phillies, probably maybe even in an inverse manner, because they were a better team, presumably, especially with the strength of schedule or lack thereof that they had when they got out of the gates hot, and then they slowed down for the rest of the season, right? But they did just enough early in the season to buy themselves, that title of being one of the best teams in baseball record-wise. So that's what I'm curious there. But in terms of the other perspective of Aaron Nola, who has been a Philly since 2015, who has started against the Mets a lot of times in between then and now. He's seen this team, this organization. He's pitched at Citi Field. He just answered a question on the pregame today in his press conference saying that he always likes coming here. He always likes coming to Citi Field. He thinks it's a great ballpark, right? He's had his fair share of success in that ballpark as well. But again, you need to change that. And the Mets were able to get to him, I believe, the last time out. He also has not pitched in quite a while. Yeah. Look up the last time that Aaron Nola has thrown a baseball in an actual game. It's been like over a week. I want to say over maybe 8 days.
I think around
8 to 9 days.
September 29th.
Exactly. So that's like 9 days right there, just about, since he's thrown a pitch in a game. I'm curious if that affects him. And if it does, is that going to be a positive impact as he's well rested? Or is that going to be a negative impact if he's not as sharp as he usually is, with the curveball in particular? But again, if you're the Mets lineup, and we'll talk about this lineup here, I'm sure in just a second, right? You have to be thinking fastball and adjusting off speed. I will always preach this. It doesn't matter if the opposing pitcher's best off-speed pitch is a curveball like Aaron Nola's is. I don't care if it's a slider like Wheeler's is. I don't care if it's a changeup like Christopher Sanchez's is, right? It doesn't really matter. You look fastball. Aaron Nola has 94, 95, maybe if he's lucky 96, I think, right? I haven't watched him pitch in a long time. I kind of forget what his MPH looks like on the fastball. But again, it's not something that's going to overpower you like Zach Wheeler throwing 98, 99. It's manageable. But if you are guessing curveball, which is his bread and butter put away pitch, it's not going to be a great recipe for success. Hump the fastball, adjust curveball. And again, the personnel in this lineup, I like a lot. You see Tyrone Taylor back in this lineup in the 8th spot. Again, we had the conversation surrounding Harrison Bader. And he hasn't really looked right at the plate. Tyrone Taylor got a break in Game 2 of the NLDS, looking for him to make an impact. In Jesse Winker, maybe he's not getting it done consistently with base hits, but he's getting on base, working walks, getting hit by pitches, and that matters. So I like this lineup a lot, Rob.
Yeah, I absolutely like this lineup a lot. I even said it on my show yesterday that, who is going to be the DH today? It was going to be JD Martinez, who's gotten a couple of hits in this recently, or is it going to be Jesse Winker, who's been getting on base via the walk and also brings that damn attitude that everybody seems to love? And I think Mendoza wants the energy all over this lineup, right? Tyrone Taylor has been well outperforming Harrison Bader. You got him that day off. I think he needed one, to be quite honest with you, and I think he's ready to go. But I think the key to this lineup today, I truly believe this. I think it's going to be the star of the postseason so far, Mark Vientos. I think this guy is going to just have just an outstanding game. I really do. I think that, this guy has ice in his veins. This guy, in the 9th inning on the road, fans going nuts. You hit that 2-run homer and shut them up. Now, it didn't win us the game, eventually, overall, but that's the guy I want up in a big spot. That's crazy to say. Who would have thought, on April 1st, that Vientos would be the guy that I want up in a postseason game in a big spot? But I think Vientos is going to be the guy that I think is going to have a huge game today. And I know that's not shocking news or anything like that. That seems kind of obvious. But there's other people that are going to probably say Alonso, Taylor, Alvarez. I'm gonna go with the simple choice. I think Mark Vientos. I think that this guy is just another breed. I think that he's not afraid of the moment. Obviously, we've seen it on the road already, and I think he's just gonna just get to another level being at home with the fan base. So I love this lineup today. Like I'm very impressed with Mendoza going back to certain guys like Winker because of the attitude, because of the on base, and that's what you want to do, especially when you got Marte behind him, because Marte has been pounding that ball there between first and second like every single game in the postseason. And Winker can steal a base. Wicking can go first to third on that. And I think that 6 and 7 spot's going to also be key because of that Marte at the bottom of the order as well. So this again, we talked about this for a while now. This lineup is deep and it's not easy to get through. And if this team, starts to hit 5, 6, 7 hits in an inning, you're in trouble because that only doesn't just put runs on the board. That increases the pitch count of Aaron Nola. And that's the key to this Mets lineup today, right? You want to score runs against Nola, but you also want him to get out of the game early. Because if you're Rob Thompson, do you want your bullpen in this ballgame? Your best chance of winning is Aaron Nola dominating as far as possible into the game. Because you can't bring your bullpen in the 5th inning and think you're going to have a better chance of winning the ball game if you're the Phillies. Because the Mets have shown to beat the Phillies bullpen barely in the first 2 games. And that's exactly what the Mets have to do. They got to work Aaron Nola, get a couple of runs off of him, and get him out of the game by the 5th inning. If you do that, I think we're going to have a very successful game in Game 3 at home at Citi Field. And I think the Mets will win.
Keep working the count, man. Keep working the count. Get to their bullpen. You've seen that you can already be successful against the best in their bullpen. We haven't seen a guy that we've seen a lot of out of their bullpen, which I'm kind of surprised about, in Jose Alvarado. Rob Thompson has basically elected not to put him in any tight games at all costs, maybe because the Mets, even going back to the Dom Smith days, which seemed like forever ago, have had decent success against Jose Alvarado. Now I'm gonna knock on wood here, right? Because things can change and Alvarado can just snap out of it, with the snap of a finger. But again, it is what it is. You got to get Aaron Nola out of the game. And the Mets are in a better position, a much better position with Aaron Nola out of the game, obviously, and they can continuously burn the Phillies bullpen going into games, at least Game 4 going tomorrow back to back. You look at the career numbers for the 3, 4, 5 hitters and the number 8 hitter in this Mets lineup against Aaron Nola. It's pretty damn good. Not gonna lie. It's pretty damn good. But again, conversely, the Phillies lineup also has some pretty good career numbers in the middle of their order, and also Edmundo Sosa towards the bottom of their lineup against Sean Manaea. So I think it's pretty even there. Again, both teams have seen these respective pitchers quite a bit. I would say the Mets more so with Aaron Nola, just because Aaron Nola's been in the division for about 9 years and Sean Manaea has kind of bounced around. But again, I think that there's no clear edge, I will say, in terms of one lineup having an advantage over the other. It's going to be classic, hard-nosed, NL East baseball, better team comes out on top. And I think that obviously the Mets at this juncture with the home crowd might be in a little bit better of a position, but Sean Manaea has to go out there and start strong. I will say this, Sean Manaea has looked good, but he hasn't looked like the Sean Manaea that we've seen towards the tail end of the season, right? In his last 2 starts. I will say that. In the first inning, he needs to go out there and establish why he is one of the better pitchers, if not best lefties, maybe, right? Or not best lefties because you have Chris Sale on the NL. But again, one of the better lefties in the NL, right? He has to go out there and do that. The first inning for me is everything for Sean Manaea. Go out there, post a 0, maybe even look at a strikeout, which might be giving you a little bit more confidence. Like that first inning is everything. And I go back to that Milwaukee game, not in the wild card series Game 2, but the one that was one of the last series before that Braves doubleheader, in which he threw 30 plus pitches in the first inning. You got to avoid something like that. if you go out there and you're Sean Manaea, knowing how good you are in probably the biggest game of your career thus far, which is the case for many of this Mets team, minus maybe a Francisco Lindor, right? I think he's probably the only one that he can say he's played in bigger games up until this point. And the Phillies, they just went to the World Series back in 2022, so they know what big games are like. This is a little bit of a different feeling for the New York Mets, but I think they're up to the task. But especially Sean Manaea, go out there, post an efficient zero in the opening frame. I think that can start to get the confidence rolling and snowball into the rest of the game, hopefully into inning 6, 7, or maybe even beyond for Sean Manaea in tonight's matchup.
Yeah, the first inning is of utter importance, right? You put up a zero and say you do get a strikeout, maybe against Harper or right away against Schwarber as leadoff hitter, right? You got the fan base all behind you now. They're going to be crazy when the game's starting, but you get that strikeout, you get that first zero in the first inning and get your team up in the bottom of the first, and it's 0-0. That's what you want going into your first home game in the postseason. You want that craziness to continue because, look, it can happen quickly, right? You know, the Phillies get a lead in the first inning. If somebody hits a home run quickly, it's going to be like, oh, here we go. All right, right? Nobody's going to give up, right? The fans are still going to be loud, but that's going to put a little bit of a punch to the gut a little bit. But you put up that zero, man. That place is going to be crazy. The lineup's coming up. I mean, it's a perfect scenario. The Mets have a perfect scenario situation here. They just have to capitalize, right? Everything's setting up for them to win this ball game. They have to do it, right? And look, the Phillies, I think, have to play perfect today, right? Any mistake, the crowd gets louder. Any big strikeout against them, the fans get louder, right? They are a team. They're going to have to be perfect. I think the Mets, they don't need to make mistakes. But when you're at home, you can afford to have a mishap because you do have a chance to make up for it, right? And you know you got the fan base behind you. I know that's kind of like a weird saying, but it's true, right? I can assure you that the Mets fans aren't going to boo Mets players like the Phillies fans booed the hell out of the Phillies the first couple of innings of Game 2, right? Because they were very, very nervous. I don't think that's going to happen because guess what? The Mets fans know of that comeback ability from the New York Mets. So you're just waiting if that becomes the case and they're trailing, waiting for that comeback to happen because you've seen it time and time again. We seen the Mets come back twice in Game 2 and the Phillies scratch it out because they had the last at bat. I think this game is always going to be in hand because of that comeback ability. And that's also what fans and the Mets lineup knows. And the Phillies know that as well. So, yeah, you're right, Chris. Sean Manaea put up a zero in the first inning. Lineup. How great it would be to get a couple of runs in the first inning against Nola, right? Because you know they're going to have that bullpen scrambling as quickly as possible. Here's a point right here. Rob Thompson can't afford not to go to his bullpen as quickly as possible. The Mets can, take a step back a little bit. They don't have to throw Manaea out of the ball game if he's not looking too great. You're gonna hold him off for a little bit because you still have the home field advantage in this game. You still got the last at bat, and you also got the home game tomorrow. The Phillies don't want to lose this game. So if Aaron Nola doesn't look good in the first couple of innings, Rob Thompson's going to his bullpen. Even though he probably doesn't want to, he can't let that game get away from him because games in the playoffs can get away from the road team if things like that happen. And he let the trickle-down effect and everything just keeps on, bowling over and bad things keep on happening, the game can be over before we even blink. So that's what the Mets have to try to do. They have to beat up on Nola early. Let Rob Thompson get to that bullpen early. Not only do they got to use a lot of their bullpen, they also have to try to win a ball game. And you know how that is? Doing it on the road? No, because the Phillies haven't done it yet. The Mets have. So you put the pressure on them as the road team I think we have a good shot. I think why not just put your foot on their throats. See if they can take a breath. We don't know if they can yet, right? It's easy to do it at home, Chris.
You know, the player that I'm looking for to break out in these next 2 games, you said Mark Vientos. I'm going Francisco Lindor. Because, you know, I know he had 2 hits in NLDS game 2. I know he had 2 hits. He went 2 for 5. He's been working pretty decent at bats in terms of getting on base for the walks, especially down below in the count. He's hitting 235 with a 711 OPS in his first 5 games in the playoffs here in 2024. He hasn't played at Citi Field in over a month. He's mentioned this time and time again in his press conferences on the off day yesterday and also today. I see a little bit of a calm energy and a calm demeanor about Francisco Lindor. And that puts me in a comfortable space as a fan. So I see your Mark Vientos, and I'm going to raise you a Francisco Lindor. The top 2 guys in this Mets lineup, when it matters the most, will come through in a large way for the New York Mets. But yeah, 100%. I mean, listen, put the pressure on them. And also, I'm kind of curious in terms of, on the flip side of things, of what you were talking about the Phillies bullpen and how they might utilize it. What do you think, especially after game 2 of this series and Carlos Mendoza and the way that he managed his bullpen, in the later innings, going Buto, Diaz, and McGill in the 7-6 loss. Let's say Sean Manaea goes 6. Let's say he's able to get this Mets team 6 innings. Who do you go to? I think my immediate answer for the 7th is going to be Reed Garrett. That's boom, done. Reed Garrett, you're in there. Post a 0.
Yep.
8, 9, Stanek, I think needs to see this ball game. I think Ryan Stanek needs to see this ball game. No matter if you throw him in the 8th or 9th, he needs to see this ball game. And then, I understand that Diaz hasn't looked his sharpest, but how do you not trust in Edwin Diaz?
You have to.
Your star close. You have to trust in him. If you put this guy in a position to win a ball game, you got to trust in him. I don't care what he's looked like recently. Not only they're paying him star closer money, but the money aside, right? This guy has electricity in his arm. When he gets into trouble, as he did in the Diamondback series, and as he did in this previous game, he abandons his fastball that he throws 97, 98, 99 consistently. For what reason? I got no idea.
I don't know.
So you would hope that something clicks with him and Alvarez, just like it clicked to take the series in Arizona after he gave up that horrendous grand slam to Corbin Carroll. You would hope that if you entrust in him in a situation in the 9th inning, he's going to go with the fastball. Yes, you can utilize and set up your fastball with the slider. No one's saying you can't. But again, if you don't have it, just keep pumping the fastball in there. Because honestly, if you throw a batter all fastballs, I'm more confident in that rather than if you throw them all sliders. I really am. So that's if I had to give you, my sequence here, Manaea for 6, hopefully 7. It makes the job even easier for Carlos Mendoza in terms of decision-making. But again, worst case scenario here, Manaea 6, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, Edwin Diaz. Boom. Give me a W.
Yeah, I'm on board with those names right there, right? Because right now, Jose Buto is not in that circle of trust right now. You can't trust him. I mean, maybe Mendoza will because you're at home and see if he got something there and have somebody ready just in case. But I don't think you can play any games here in game 3, the swing game that we're both facing here with both teams. I agree with you, right? Right now, Maton, we know that he had a rough outing with the Brewers, but he's does what he does sometimes with basically nothing. It's amazing that guy can throw 91 miles out of fastball, but still get people out. It's just amazing to me. But I think you have to go with the guys you said. I think Reed Garrett has found another level to his game in this postseason. You got to use him. And I agree, Stanek 100%. Now, Stanek scares me a little bit at times because even with his really, really good stuff, he tends to be a little bit wild. Now, if he's on, he's almost untouchable. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with going with Stanek and seeing what we do here with Stanek. And look, we are not going anywhere if Edwin Diaz is not closing the game in the ninth inning. I'm sorry. You might not, some might not trust him. Some think that, he's not the same as he was 2 years ago. Probably not. But that doesn't mean he's not one of the better closers still in baseball. He's still got electric stuff. The problem with him this year is that as soon as he thinks he doesn't have a fastball, he goes away from it. You can't do that. Even if it's a pitch you can't throw in the zone, you got to change the eye level of the batter, because maybe that slider that you feel like is your best pitch right now is still going to change the eye level of that hitter. And if that fastball is even, head high and it's not even, a competitive pitch, he's still going to think about that fastball and not just worry about the slider. If you get too slider happy, the hitters know what's coming and they're going to cheat. And that's when you get into trouble. So I'm on board with you. If Manaea can go 6, regardless of the score, if Manaea can go 6, I think you have to go Garrett, Stanek, Diaz, regardless of whatever the score is, to be quite honest with you, because with this Mets comeback ability, you don't want them to increase a lead any more than it might be, right? If it's a 2-run lead, you're not going to put in Ottavino or you're not going to put in Buto and hope for the best, right? You want to keep the game where it's at, regardless if it's a lead or a deficit. And that's why these guys have to be the ones pitching in this ball game today. And look, if it's different, Chris, don't we have to trust Mendoza?
Yeah, no, I agree. And to that point, yeah, 100. I mean, I'm always going to trust Carlos Mendoza.
Yeah.
That's not even a question. Like, even if it doesn't work out, hindsight, it's always 2020. I understand that. I'm always going to trust in Mendoza. Honestly, I just want to get this out of the way. We've talked about, we don't shy away on our channels about Mets losses, and we critique the game after it's happened, right? And we always talk about it as if it's hindsight's always 2020, because it is. That's how we assess the game. There's no other way that you can assess the game. But it doesn't mean that we don't trust the manager moving forward, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that and don't understand us in terms of when we talk about that. It's not like we don't trust this guy anymore. It's that we thought it was the wrong decision at the time. Or maybe it worked out, or we agreed with the decision and it still didn't work out at the time, and we're just assessing that. But one thing I have a question for you is, and I see some people talking about it in the chat here, so shout out to Ken and shout out to Henry as well for bringing this up. There's a little bit of an unusual circumstance, and the Phillies, more so than not, don't have this problem or advantage, because it could be a good problem to have, or it could be a bad problem to have in terms of making you overthink how you utilize your bullpen. Let's say the Mets win today's ball game. Just let's say it happens, right? Or let's just say, well, tomorrow's a different story if they lose this ball game, obviously, because it's all hands on deck for Game 4. But let's say the Mets win this ball game. What do you do tomorrow with Quintana as it relates to David Peterson and Tyler McGill? Because you still have those guys, right? They are a part of this bullpen at this point. What do you do? Do you use David Peterson tomorrow? Do you try to get do you get what I'm trying to get at here? Because it's a weird circumstance to have 2 starting pitchers that can provide you length out of the bullpen, and seeing when you utilize them instead of regular bullpen guys that might get you 1 or 2 innings, right? Instead of like maybe 3 or 4, like David Peterson and Tyler McGill can. I'm very curious what you think.
So since Mendoza basically said that Sanger's pitching Game 5, depending on length, right? If he could probably go to the 50, maybe 60 pitches. So give or take, we don't know what inning that could be. If he shuts down guys with 8 pitches in the first 3 innings, with 25, 30 pitches in the first 3 innings, he can go 5. But say if Sanger can go 5, right? You're going to have to probably piggyback, 3, 4, and it's an elimination game if you're in Game 5. So you're going to have everybody available that hasn't pitched the day before, right? Starter-wise, so to speak. I think Mendoza's going to have either McGill or Peterson ready to go in this game. And whoever's not going to be available in this game will be ready tomorrow to piggyback off of Quintana, regardless if he's very good or not so well. I think that's the way Mendoza is going to go about it. I do think it's going to be more McGill today, only because I think he would want to make Rob Thompson make that decision to get guys off the bench. Because if Manaea is the lefty, are you going to bring Peterson in, even though Peterson is good and better than McGill? Do you leave the lefty in there to keep Rob Thompson's, to not make a decision? I think you have to go to McGill. Say if Manaea is not pitching well and he's not giving up a ton of runs, but his pitch count's getting up and it's the 4th inning, right? I go to McGill. I wouldn't waste time, right? This is the game you need. This is the game both teams needs. I go to McGill for probably 2, maybe even 3 innings, and then you can work your bullpen the way you were supposed to work your bullpen later in the ball game. So, in regards to your question, I think Peterson's going to be the one available tomorrow. I know Quintana's a lefty as well, but the way Quintana has pitched, I see him still pitching well because we haven't seen anything else. I mean, we could be totally wrong, but the 2 biggest guys in that lineup that are the dangerous hitters in the Phillies lineup are Schwarber and Hopper, and they're both lefties. So I'm very curious about that. But you know what? That's 2 Swiss Army knives that Mendoza has in his bullpen if he needs to use them. You can't worry about game 5 and game 3. You just can't. You can worry about game 4 because you will be playing that game. But you can't worry about game 5. Honestly, if you have to use everybody and your mother in games 3 and 4 to win, game 5, it is what it is, right? Yeah. Their bullpen's going to be shot. Our bullpen's going to be shot. We used everybody. They used everybody. It's it's the team that has the will to win in game 5. And that's the way I'm going to go about it. Game 3 and 4, you got to go all in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think McGill is going to be prioritized over David Peterson today, and David Peterson's probably going to be piggybacking off of Jose Quintana. Now, I know a lot of people want maybe David Peterson to start tomorrow. I think it's definitely going to be Jose Quintana, especially with what he poured in Milwaukee, right, in that crucial game. And then obviously, you have a short leash for Jose Quintana. If he gets in some trouble, you got David Peterson to toss in there. But an underrated aspect about game 5 and the potential of game 5 is that you have Sunday starters also ready to go, because the way that this schedule is worked out for the NLDS, it means that both Christopher Sanchez and Luis Severino will be available out of the bullpen, presumably if it's all hands on deck for each respective team after Zach Wheeler and whoever the game 5 starter is going to be for the New York Mets, right? So probably Kodai Senga at this point, right? So that situation probably applies if there is a set game 5, which I think that I'm not going to sugarcoat, I'm not going to lie. I think that this series, above any other series probably around the league, hopefully I'm not jinxing us and hopefully it's the other way around, but I think that this series has a potential to go 5 games. And Zach Wheeler, I don't think the Phillies are thinking about needing to use Christopher Sanchez after Zach Wheeler, because Zach Wheeler was cruising in his previous start over 7 innings. That situation probably applies more so to the Mets, because you're going to have Kodai Senga, who's still going to be on a limited pitch count. I know that he looked decent over 31 pitches in the first game of this series, but again, you can extend them to what? 55, 60, 65 if you're lucky. But knowing that you have Severino available on regular rest, right, for at least an inning, because he looked good for the first 5 innings before he got into trouble for that 6th inning, that's kind of reassuring for me as well. So it's just an interesting dynamic to see how both teams are going to approach these next few games moving forward.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this, right? We're talking about, Peterson as a bullpen guy, as a lefty, because the Mets really don't have a trusted lefty in their bullpen. And how bad is it? Or how much does it suck that Brooks Raley's not here? Because that would have made all the difference in the world in this bullpen, and it would just make the bullpen even deeper. And I know it just came to mind because, we're trying to pick a spot for Peterson in these next 2 games, because game 5 is still, if necessary, obviously, regardless of who wins today. But I truly believe that this game, you have to play it almost like an elimination game. And I don't know if the Phillies would do that, but I think the Mets should do that because they have the advantage at home. I think you have to. I think whatever you got to do to win this game, you go to war tomorrow with Quintana, especially if you win today. You go to war with Quintana, and you have mostly everybody about because you win this game. If you take the next 2 games, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a couple of days off before the NLCS. So that's already a good sign. And the schedule in your records is very weird, right? There's days off in there that's like, that can help both teams, but it can really help.
I mean, we're live at 4:12 p.m. right now, Rob. It's a 5:08 start time for crying out loud in the playoffs. This is already weird, as weird as it gets.
You're 100% about that. Well, I can't get over that. We played almost every day, every baseball game in this series. Well, there's only 2, but in daytime, like it's annoying. So annoying, but I understand because
Friday's game will be, if there's a Friday game, it will also be at 4:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So there's no night games in this entire series schedule.
Thank you, West Coast teams, by the way, because we are playing with the National League teams when the American Leagues are playing with the American League teams. So unfortunately, the West Coast teams, you can't play at 4:00 in the afternoon in Eastern Time because it's 1:00 there. That's not fair to their fans. So I get why they're doing it. But it's just annoying. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can actually get some. Well, not really, because I really don't sleep after the game, win or lose. Right? I'm too pumped, or I'm either too pissed off. So it's like it sucks either way. But it is a little bit better that the game can end around 7 or 8 o'clock, and you're like, oh, okay. I can shower, relax a little bit. Curse at the shower if I need to. Whatever I got to do. Whatever I got to do, it seems like you got a little bit more time. The day, it's still sunny out. Got my Mets flag out right there, showing everybody down south that this is not just Brave country, by the way, where I'm at right now. So, let's go. I'm ready, pumped. I'm ready to go, right? We're less than an hour away until game time. I already, found my way into sneaking into an SNY broadcast during the pregame because I want to see what's going on at Citi Field because I don't get it here, unfortunately. But I found my way illegally, but that's okay. That's okay. So we're definitely gonna be ready for this game, and I think if the Mets limit their mistakes and execute, I don't think the Phillies have a chance in this game. To be quite honest with you.
I think what Jonathan is saying in the chat here as well, saying McGill is better as a long reliever. I think the Mets I think that is very true, 100%. Like that spot that the Mets pitched him in game 2 should have went to Stanek. I wholeheartedly think that. I don't think that Tyler McGill is built as a closer in a bullpen or even just a one-inning type of guy. He's the type of guy that needs to go out there and pitch multiple innings. And his history, right? And the limited sample size, not just this season that we've seen Tyler McGill out of the bullpen, like he's better as a long reliever than he is for a single standalone inning. So maybe the Mets make the adjustment. But again, I'd be wary of putting Tyler McGill out there in a crucial situation like that again, knowing that you only need one inning for him because as history repeats itself often, he just hasn't had that type of success. So again, final thoughts for me. I'm excited for this game. The nerves are a little bit, they're flowing. The nerves are flowing. I decided to take a chance and wear the Hawaiian on a Tuesday. I usually wear them for Fridays. Maybe I'll break it out again. Should there be a game 5 on Friday? But again, this is the Tuesday Hawaiian edition. I appreciate you all being here. Make sure to hit those thumbs up on both channels that are streaming this pregame show right now on Rob's channel and on my channel, right? Subscribe to both. Hit the thumbs up on both. We got you all covered on pregame and the postgame, right? We will be live directly after the game. We don't shy away from wins. We don't shy away from losses. We don't shy away from anything regarding this Mets team. And we stand on 10 toes with what we say. We are confident in this team going forward, right? Go out there and get the job done. I'd much rather be talking about spamming W's in the live chat and seeing the W's pour in my live chat than having to sit here and assess, which we will do if necessary, what went wrong in a loss. Let's go out there. Let's get it done. I want to see how the Mets respond. You got kicked in game 2. I want to see how you respond. That needs to start in the first inning on the offensive side of the ball and the pitching side of Sean Manaea, right? I think if the Mets go out there and if they allow the Phillies to score 1 or 2 early, and they go down, obviously it's not a death sentence with the way that the Mets have been playing recently. Never say die, never say never with this Mets team. But again, I'd be much more comfortable if you keep it toe-to-toe and you keep it even in a tie ball game or even with a lead for the first couple of innings. So again, nobody said it was going to be easy. We're definitely not underestimating the Phillies. We know they're a great team, but the Mets can get it done. Let's do it. Change the narrative. Hashtag change the narrative. Go out there and do it. Let's go Mets, baby. See you all in the post game.
Absolutely. And listen, don't let them come up for air. That's it, right? Let them feel the deficit and coming from behind or trying to come from behind on the road. It's a whole different animal when it's on the road and the pressure is on for the team who is one of the best teams in baseball record-wise. They're supposed to win. Remember that, guys. After every inning, after every at-bat, after every pitch, we are playing with house money. Even though we want to win, and there is house money a part of this, right? The wild card teams seem to have this house money craziness that goes on in the postseason, American League and National League. It just is what it is. Limit the mistakes. Fundamental game. Manaea's got to pitch well. The offense needs to do what they've done the last two games. Score runs. And they have been doing it. Either if they're early or late, you got to score runs. I love to get those runs early because you're just going to have that place jumping today. But let's win a ball game, guys. Manaea, Nola on the mound. Game 3 at Citi Field, less than an hour away. That is your lineup for the New York Mets. Hopefully, we're talking about a W and spanning those Ws on the post-game show right after the game, guys. Win or lose, we will be here. So make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification button, guys. With that said, thank you for tuning into the Amazing Mets pregame show, playoff edition. Enjoy the game, guys. Let's go, Mets, and we'll see you on the post game. LFGM, guys.
Mets.
It's not working again, guys. I froze again. Good sign. I apologize. Oh, lordy lord. Hi, guys. I apologize for that.